Hi, Jean Schnupp here, and welcome to another Savvy Sightseer video vacation. This time we are off to one of my favorite countries, England, and one of my favorite parts of it, the Cotswolds. When I was on a day trip there, I was asked what had brought me to the frozen in time South Central English region. My answer? Murder. For years I had been watching the British crime dramas set amid the rolling countryside like Father Brown, Midsummer Murders, and Agatha Christie. So while I wasn't interested in witnessing any real murders, I did want the chance to see that countryside for myself. I was a little worried that it could get kind of boring to see so much cuteness, but the truth is that beyond the honey-colored houses, meandering lanes, and thatched roofs, each village has its own unique personality. Some have quirks, some have hidden secrets, some have both. Very quickly you find out why writers such as J.R.R. Tolkien, Jane Austen, and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle were drawn to the solitude here for writing and inspiration. We'll take a ramble into several villages, some with unusual names like Lower Slaughter and Stow-in-the-Wold, as well as the more cosmopolitan ones of Cheltenham, Oxford, and Bath for a delightful look at this beautiful part of England. What's so interesting and ironic is the reason we have the cozy Cotswolds to enjoy is because of its initial downfall. A bustling and quite wealthy sheep business made the Cotswolds very plush. Money poured in. Grateful business owners invested in housing and elaborate churches. Pretty much everyone benefited from the profits. Then the wool industry dried up with the advent of cotton, and towns got stuck in a time warp. Modernization wasn't part of the budget, and now it wouldn't even be considered. In fact, strict regulations prevent it. For example, new buildings must use the same limestone materials that fosters the tourism which has become their prime source of income. And residents don't look at their timelessness as a detriment. They pride themselves on being the counterculture to big cities, where small village residents know each other and enjoy a laid-back style of living, the envy of their visitors. The word Cotswold is in fact two words, Cots meaning a sheep's shelter, and wold meaning gently rolling hills. In 1966, part of the Cotswolds, about an hour-and-a-half drive northwest of London, was named an area of outstanding natural beauty as part of a post-World War II movement to protect the countryside and maintain the character and integrity of the area. At one time, England was praised as having the best wool in Europe, and the best in England to be found was in the Cotswolds. The Cotswold lions are sheep with long, shaggy coats and a faint golden tinge that resemble lions' manes. By the 15th century, half of England's economy was from wool, and the government did all it could to ensure the industry prospered. In the late 1500s, a law was passed that all Englishmen, except nobles, had to wear a woolen cap to church, and there were the Burial in Woolens Acts of the mid-1660s that required bodies that hadn't died from the plague to be buried in wool. That forced the purchase of wool. Sometimes deaths were misdiagnosed and people revived just as a wool sheath was being closed over them, and they shrieked, "You can't pull the wool over my eyes. I'm not dead yet." And so now that's how we got that familiar phrase. The law wasn't repealed until 1814. The importance of the sheep culture is evident in the names of towns, such as Sherborne. That's a brook where sheep were taken to be shorn. By the 18th century, the wool trade gave way to weaving, and now more fields are being used to grow wheat and barley and less for sheep grazing. Cotswold stone is easily recognizable. It's a type of local limestone formed when the region was covered in a warm sea. Boundary lines are made of these honey-colored slabs, formed as a drywall. That's fencing created by careful stacking. No mortar is used at all. The pointed ones on top deter sheep from trying to jump over the wall. According to the J.R.R. Tolkien Society, the Bell Inn in Moreton Marsh was the inspiration behind the Prancing Pony, Middle-earth's most famous pub in the book Lord of the Rings. There's no definitive proof, but they base their claim on the description of a pub with 3 stories and an entrance via a courtyard. This is where I stayed, and it certainly seemed to have more than enough atmosphere to make me a believer. Moreton Marsh was a principal market town in the northern Cotswolds. The oldest building is believed to be the 16th century curfew tower on the High Street. Its bell was rung nightly until 1860. Moreton Marsh was granted a market charter in 1227, and the market is still held every Tuesday throughout the year. It was a traveler's town for almost 1700 years and was used as a coaching station before the coming of the Oxford to Worcester Railway in 1853. It's one of the few Cotswold towns with a station, which is why it made a great sightseeing hub for me, and it is only about a 90-minute trip from London. Typical sights throughout the region are like this, taken from the top of Broadway Tower. You may have glimpsed it in a few movies or TV shows, such as Sherlock Holmes, the one starring Benedict Cumberbatch, and American's Idol Susan Boyle's film debut in 2013 in The Christmas Candle. Called the highest little castle in the Cotswolds, the 65-foot-tall Broadway Tower on Beacon Hill was built solely on a whim for an 18th century aristocrat. It's the brainchild of famed landscape architect Lancelot Capability Brown and was commissioned by the Earl of Coventry in 1798. His wife was curious if she could see a fire signal lit there from their estate, Croom Castle, about 22 miles away. She wanted to be able to point out her window and say, "That is my tower." Such is the folly of people with too much time and money on their hands. She never actually visited the tower, which is surely a loss to her for missing the beautiful vista. On a clear day, you can see up to 55 miles away. In the early 1960s, due to mounting concerns of nuclear intrusion during the Cold War, more than 1,600 underground bunkers were constructed every 12 miles apart around the peaceful countryside. The purpose was to warn the population with sirens and flares when a nuclear strike was detected. The last one was installed in 1961, 25 feet below ground, about 50 yards northwest of the Broadway Tower. It was designated as a master post with a crew of 4 volunteers from the Royal Observer Corps, who fortunately never received the dreaded call to action. Although most of the other bunkers were closed by 1968, the Broadway bunker stayed in use for training purposes until 1991. In 2011, it was opened to the public. A sight unique to Britain is the iconic red telephone booth, but with most people having cell phones, they are being creatively repurposed in the Cotswolds. The one on the left has become a self-service tourist information center in Stanton, but the one on the right in Upper Slaughter definitely gives pause. It's a defibrillator. Maybe it could come in handy given the region's TV reputation for dying people. Or maybe it's for one of the hikers who love this area for getting back to nature, but may not be as hardy as they think they are as they take to the Cotswold Way. The impetus for developing a nearly 100-mile walk laid out between Chipping Campden and Bath came in part from a group called the Ramblers. Since 1935, their goal had been to help coax, campaign, and build Britain path by path into one of the most walker-friendly countries in the world. The government helped with funding, and in 2007, after 30 years of planning and clearing the path, the Cotswold Way National Trail officially opened. A common sight in some villages is the thatched roof. Some rooftops can hold some pretty unusual adornments. This roof in Stanton has a fox on the prowl. Such straw finials are a chance to show off a thatcher's skill and imagination, and might even scare away the odd bird from picking at the roof. Stanton was the backdrop for a different Sherlock Holmes series starring the late Jeremy Brett. Thatched roofs are a mixed bag. Made of straw, they are created by craftsmen and require skill and endurance. They give houses the signature look of quaintness associated with the Cotswolds, though only a few entire towns sport the look, relying instead on some local tile stone. Thatch is a degradable material and so requires replacing every 20 to 25 years, a very expensive proposition. They are said to be great insulators because they have high wind and weather resistance. Ironically, thatched roofs once were the mark of a poor man's house. Now they have become status symbols for the wealthier homeowners, and especially those who want to be environmentally sensitive. Stanton, with its combination of thatched and tile stone roofs, along with a tiny crystal-clear brook, overflowing roses, and lines of limestone walls, is considered to be the best preserved town in the region. It's the one that travel guru Rick Steves saves to use the word quaint when describing it. References to a town of Stanton go back to the 11th century, but some speculate it has been around even longer, and that this church, could be resting on old pagan worship grounds. Nearby, Stanway is a very popular site in both TV and movies, including Father Brown, of course, the 2004 film version of Vanity Fair, and the 1996 adaptation of Emma. On that grand Jacobean manor house, you would think the point of all those windows is so that you could look out on some of the beautiful rolling countryside of this 350-acre estate, not to look out on this dreary burial ground. But outward views were not the main drive behind having so many panes of glass. Rather, it was to impress people because of the window tax. First imposed in England in 1696, homes were levied a fee based on how many windows they had. Not long after its introduction, people started bricking up their walls and windows to avoid paying the tax, so the excess of ones on this house screamed wealth. There's a bit of eccentricity that pervades this entire estate. This coffin built into the churchyard wall is a case in point. No one is quite sure what it's doing there. It could be recycled bits of stonework incorporated into the wall as shelving, or it could have been a form of advertising by the stonemason who also chiseled the headstones as resting places for the lords. Inside, the house had even more oddities. There's a 22-foot-long shuffleboard table and an 18th century bouncing exercise seat designed to shake up inner organs and keep them healthy. Some might consider Stanway's owners a little quirky as well. James Charteris, also known as Lord Jamie Needpath, was an advocate for trepanning. That's drilling a hole in one's head to expand the consciousness. His wife, Lady Amanda Felding, expanded consciousness in another way. She was a pioneer of LSD research. While most British gardens are well tended and trees carefully groomed, having an untrimmed one is also typical in old graveyards, like the one at Stanway. They indicated a part of the cemetery that you wanted to steer clear of. That was the area where the plague victims had been buried, so it was topped with a naturally grown yew as a marker. With 350 acres to play with, you can find all kinds of great uses for your property. Besides a grand mansion, church, and fields for sheep grazing, you can install your own cricket field. The cricket pavilion built in 1925 for Stanway was a gift by frequent guest Sir James Barry, which is why it was dubbed the Peter Pan Pavilion. He regularly stayed here and founded an amateur cricket team for his friends to play against local teams. Among the sometimes players were Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, G.K. Chesterton, A.A. Milne, and P.G. Wodehouse, a veritable who's who of authors of the era. The decorative stones serve as both to support the building and to keep out any farmland vermin. When I was there, they were just wrapping up a Father Brown filming on the pitch, used today by the Stanway Cricket Club. Self-proclaimed to be the jewel of the Cotswolds, Broadway is one of the larger towns and has one of the longest high or main streets in England. The Broadway is the wide, grass-fringed main street lined with typical Cotswold buildings, many dating from the 16th century. The town was a favorite of the Arts and Crafts Colony, a group of American and some British artists and writers who made it their home in the 1880s. Members included John Singer Sargent, Henry James, J.M. Barrie, Frank Millay, and William Morris. Many of the American artists would stay in this serene town and gain quite a reputation that had nothing to do with their artistic talents. Peace and quiet was reportedly shattered by the group, described as a lively bunch. One wrote, "Nothing we do scandalizes the village. Whatever we do or say or wear or sing, they only say, them Americans is out again." Broadway is at the northern tip of the Cotswolds in the county of Worcester. There's lots of shops and eateries here, and one thing you will surely find in every pub is Worcestershire sauce. That's perhaps the county's most famous product. It was first produced locally by two chemists, John Wiley Lay and William Perrins, and went on sale in 1837. It quickly became the British steak sauce of choice, even on British passenger ships. The bottles are still wrapped in paper, as was done originally to protect them from breaking during sea voyages. If you go to the local deli for your bottle of Lee and Perrins in this very traditional, very quaint town, you might be surprised to find a Mini Cooper in the deli's front window. Always a business teacher at heart, I love innovative marketing. This deli definitely takes window dressing to an all-new level by sporting a full-size Mini in its bowed glass case. First hitting the roads in 1959, the British Motor Corporation economy car was an instant hit and became the fun-to-have wheels for the hip 1960s set. It was originally designed in response to demand for a small, four-seater, fuel-efficient vehicle amid fuel rationing due to the Suez Crisis, and it sold for a mere 460 pounds. It revolutionized the small car and became the best-selling British car in history. In 1999, the Mini was voted second most influential car of the 20th century, right behind Henry Ford's Model T. In 2019, a special edition 60th anniversary car was rolled out with a luxury price tag of £42,000. By sharp contrast, Snowsell is a very small, secluded village, population less than 200. The center of town is a small green with a 19th century church. Records indicate a religious structure has occupied this space since the 12th century. There's no post office, school, or regular bus service. It doesn't even have a standing police station, just a mobile one. Pretty little houses cluster around the churchyard. The unspoiled look of the hamlet makes it another popular filming spot. Fans of The Diary of Bridget Jones will spot the house used as the parent home she visited in December for the holidays. Only filming was actually done in the summer, so villagers had a true Christmas in July experience. For the winter scene, snow had to be fabricated. A Christmas tree was put up in the village, and houses were covered in Christmas decorations, including a Santa on a roof. Residents are hopeful a sequel will happen and bring back star Renee Zellweger and more fame to the little village. Aside from fans of the movie or hikers, the main draw to the town is Snowsell Manor, an unassuming Tudor mansion that houses a truly bizarre collection. The house was purchased in 1919 by Charles Paget Wade, an eccentric architect and antiquary. By today's standards, Wade would be considered a world-class hoarder. He packed the place with so many oddities, it is said he had to move into the old priest's house in the courtyard. His wealth came from a sugar plantation he inherited. That allowed him to follow his model of let nothing perish. Among the curiosities in the house, there's a full cobbler shop with a workbench and shoes in repair. Musical instruments, there's musical and mechanical toys, there's full sets of samurai armor, and even Japanese theater masks, and perhaps even a ghost. A 16th century young woman in a green dress has been spotted pacing around the place. You might think twice about living in a town with slaughter in its name, especially thinking about all those crime shows. But Lois Slaughter draws its name from an old Saxon word, slow or marshy place. The village's main road is split by the River Eye and has been voted the most romantic street in Britain. Because large tour buses can't maneuver its tiny lanes, it is not overrun with tourists. The little town was busy, though, in May 2019, as film crews and stars descended there for scenes in the newest version of the movie Emma, released in 2020, based on Cotswold regular author Jane Austen. A stroll along the invitingly clear brook gives you a chance to appreciate what makes it so beautiful, like this typical, colorful English garden. And eventually, rounding a bend, you come to a picture-perfect country scene, a 19th century flour mill. The attached bakery has since been converted to an adorable craft gift store / post office / homemade ice cream shop. You can buy original books here with very clever titles, such as Slaughter in the Cotswolds and 50 Shades of Grey. Lois Slaughter may be the quintessential Cotswolds town, but Burton-on-the-Water, known as the Venice of the Cotswolds for its bridges over the River Windrush, wins for being the most unconventional. Here, soccer is played in the river, a car needs hedge clippers, and the entire town is replicated within itself. Each August, except during COVID 2020, a unique football game takes place in the river between local teams. It's been an annual tradition for over a century, and if it's not unusual enough, it's typically overseen by a referee dressed as a woman. Rumor has it that it was started by some men who were just plain bored one day, so to jazz things up, they decided to jump in the river and have a kickabout, and it's been carried on ever since. Here you find a Mini Cooper not behind a deli window, but under a veil of green. The topiary sits outside the village's motor museum, where you find the largest collection of historic British cars, which couldn't possibly be complete without this Cooper cutie. Perhaps the most unusual feature of Bourton is that it contains a village within a village. The 1-to-9 ratio mini village was created by a previous landlord of the old New Inn behind where the village was constructed. It was officially opened in 1937 after local craftsmen worked meticulously for 5 years. This overview lets you see what is beyond those Cotswold stone walls. It's the first model village to appear on Google Street View for a virtual tour. The model's devotion to accuracy even extends to having a miniature model village in the back of the miniature old New Inn. You won't find trains, planes, or boats here. The only things that change in the village are the shop fronts, which are kept up to date with the real retailer's alterations. Check out that bakery in the lower right corner and compare the 1937 miniature to the original, and you see how well preserved in time the village is. A prominent feature of most Cotswold towns is the War Memorial, like this in Burton-on-Water. The only town exception without one is Upper Slaughter, which is considered a sainted village, meaning that it lost nobody in World War I. It became known later as a doubly thankful village when its luck held, and all who went off from there to World War II came back, making it one of the luckiest places to live in the Cotswolds. The name Stow-on-the-Wold means meeting place on the uplands. At the height of the wool industry, it was a prime meeting place for sheep marketing, with upwards of 20,000 sheep crowding the town in a single day. The prosperous wool merchants put back some of the money they earned into the local communities, often by building manors for themselves, but just as frequently by endowing their parish churches. The so-called wool churches, like St. Edward's here, are magnificent and complete with fanciful carvings and elaborate ornamentation, such as this little doorway tucked in on its north side. It's widely believed that this was the door that sparked J.R.R. Tolkien's imagination and led to a gate in a scene in the Fellowship of the Ring. Chipping Campden is renowned for its beautiful high street, an unbroken line of terraced houses, but one that showcases many different styles of architecture. This street has prompted historians, such as G.M. Trevelyan, to claim that Chipping Campden has the most beautiful street now left on the island. So picturesque, Chipping is, of course, another favorite for filmmakers. Here's another case of knowing Old English place names that helps to understand the town's name. Chipping comes from a Saxon word for market, and Camden for valley with fields. Those fields housed herds of sheep, and in the town center is where they were marketed, at the Wool Staplers' Hall, built in 1340. Reportedly, thousands of merchants from across the globe would descend on Chipping, where traders could come and buy the much-coveted Cotswold fleeces. Of course, wool was not the only trade item in town. Those rich fields also led to an enviable market in cheese, butter, and meat as well, and there would be a busy exchange on market day in this stone market hall from 1627 on. It's even used on occasion today for craft marketers. The elaborateness of having a covered stone shelter under which local women could trade attests to the wealth of the community. This important landmark almost left Chipping. In the 1940s, the whole structure was to be sold, dismantled stone by stone, and shipped in crates across the Atlantic to be re-erected in America. But local people, alarmed at losing their ancient building, raised the money to buy it and then gave it to the National Trust. This marks both the beginning and end of the Cotswold Way. According to the National Trail Official Guidebook, walking the entire route takes between 7 and 10 days, more if you do a little sightseeing along the way. At the other end of the trail, you'll find Bath. With a blend of sophisticated, cosmopolitan, and historic sites, southern England has a wealth of extraordinary places to visit. One that's a perennial hit since Roman times is the lovely village of Bath. UNESCO has included it as a World Heritage Site because of its architectural wonders, Roman remains, and history that spans back to 863 BC, when the healing power of its natural springs was first realized. Romans took over the region in the 1st century AD and harnessed the natural resource. Along with an extensive bath complex and reservoir, Bath became a center of Roman leisure and social life. In the 18th century, British aristocracy started spending their summers here, and the town morphed into a modern, posh city with stately homes. The most famous of these is the Royal Crescent, the first crescent-shaped complex of townhouses in Europe. It was built in the late 1700s, and it's an impressive grouping of 30 homes that quickly became the entertainment center of elite society. Today, Many of the homes have combined to become an ultra-modern five-star hotel. But in the one on the very end on the right, number 1 Royal Crescent, 18th century life continues on. Retrofitted to remove later renovations, the house has been restored to its original design. And it gives a wonderful glimpse into the life of its earliest residents, complete with tools of everyday life set out on tables and desks as though the owners just stepped out for a moment. On the northwest fringes of the Cotswolds, Cheltenham is considered a gateway and capital of the region. It rivals Bath in architectural elegance and has its own crescent row of houses and its own mineral spring. Today, Cheltenham is known more as the festival town and is considered the cultural center of the Cotswolds. It plays host to about 30 major festivals every year, from the Cheltenham Gold Cup horse race to the longest-running literature festival in the world. As luck would have it, I happened to arrive on the opening day of its annual Food Fest. It was a lively and food-filling event with over 170 exhibitors with local specialties as well as exotic ones. I'm still not quite sure about those pickled eggs, but I did enjoy munching my way through the award-winning array of Cotswolds cheese. And I really liked the sign in the lower right-hand corner encouraging eating brownies. The festival is next scheduled for June 25th to the 27th, 2021. Another gateway city to the Cotswold region is Oxford, about 55 miles northwest of London. It was originally a trade crossroads and a safe place for ox to ford or cross the river. By the 13th century, it was a leading wool and leather town, but as manufacturing declined, Oxford became more of a university town, and its economy focused on catering to the students, who needed brewers, butchers, bakers, tailors, and such. I was eager to see the oldest university in the English-speaking world, officially founded in 1167. I was expecting a college town, like Princeton, with a complex of beautiful old buildings, mainly like the church here. The Christ Church College was built in 1532, but it's only an individual isolated section of the university. Oxford is actually a mishmash of buildings, old and new, spread around town. Each of Oxford's 38 colleges have their own distinctive identity and focus. A half mile from Christ Church is part of the Ashmolean, the university's Museum of Art and Archaeology, founded in 1682 as Britain's first public museum and the world's first university museum. Down the street is yet another one of the parts of the college. This is the Business College, a very modern building finished in 2001. The students of Oxford are a diverse set and come from more than 150 countries and territories. And it has a pretty impressive list of alumni. There's more than 50 Nobel laureates, 26 British prime ministers, 28 foreign presidents, including our President Bill Clinton, and even 11 saints. Noted writers also came from Oxford: Oscar Wilde, T.S. Eliot, C.S. Lewis, and Tolkien. These latter two launched an informal literary discussion group they dubbed the Inklings, and they met at area pubs, most often here at the Eagle and Child. Eventually, the group grew to 19 authors who would encourage and advise each other. Reportedly, Tolkien brought along each new chapter of The Lord of the Rings as it was written for the others to critique. The name Inklings was a pun on those who dabble in ink, the writers, and those who may have only an inkling of what they intend to write about. 8 miles out of Oxford, on the eastern edge of the Cotswolds, is Grand Blenheim Palace. It is the largest home in England that is still family-owned and lived in. The World Heritage Site, designed in the early 1700s, was given by Queen Anne and the nation to General John Churchill, the first Duke of Marlborough, for his military victories. It is best known, though, as the birthplace of Winston Churchill. His father was the younger brother of the Duke at the time when his parents visited in 1874 and his mother, American Jenny Jerome, went into labor. Like other places in this region, Blenheim is a popular backdrop for filming. The palace, as with so many large old estates, needs income to sustain it, and tourism has become its greatest source. In addition to grand rooms and beautiful grounds, a main draw bringing tourists to Blenheim is its association with Churchill. There's an extensive exhibit of his belongings, but the highlight is the bed in which the future Prime Minister was born. And somewhat strange to me, the crowning piece of this display hangs from the bed frame: a hunk of his 5-year-old curls. I like to end all of my programs with the words of Dr. Seuss: sometimes you don't appreciate the moment until it becomes a memory. And I like to add to always remember to celebrate the moments and treasure the memories. If you have any questions about this program, email me or use the contact page on my website. Of course, I also invite you to visit my website to see more of the region we visited today or any of my European destinations. When libraries are again offering in-person presentations, you can check my Programs tab to see where I'll be. Until then, visit the library site for more video vacations by Savvy Sightseer. Cheerio!